Hello there, and welcome to the Outside Views weekly report on German politics. The so-called traffic light coalition wants to downsize the Bundestag, the federal parliament. The union sharply criticizes the plans and indicates that they will go to the Federal Constitutional Court about this. Because there is sharp criticism from the union of the traffic light coalition's plans to reform electoral law. With its proposal for electoral law reform, the traffic light operates organized election fraud. That was said by the CSU General Secretary Martin Huber on Monday. We have only seen rogue states denying directly elected members of parliament access to parliament. The proposal is unconstitutional, added the parliamentary director of the CSU state group in the Bundestag, Stefan Müller, in the news portal The Pioneer. Denying elected constituency candidates the mandate is a blatant disregard for the will of the electorate and the principles of the rule of law and democracy, he said. The chairman of the union in the Commission for the Reform of the Electoral Law, Ansgar Heveling, indicated a trip to Karlsruhe. That's where our constitutional court is. He told the media company Table.media that the traffic light lay the axe on our personalized proportional representation system. Anyone who builds on constitutional sand must expect that the Constitutional Court will be appealed to, warned the CDU politician. The traffic light factions had presented a bill for an electoral law reform that would reduce the Bundestag back to its standard size of 598 MPs. Due to overhang and compensatory mandates, the parliament had continued to grow to 736 MPs most recently. The draft law by the Social Democrats, the Greens, and the Liberals now provides that there should be no more overhang and compensation mandates in the future. As a result, MPs directly elected in a constituency may not get a seat in the Bundestag. You have to imagine that. The chairman of the traffic light groups in the Bundestag sent the draft law to the CDU-CSU parliamentary group leader Friedrich Merz on Sunday. In a letter, they offered to talk about it. Overhang mandates arise when a party wins more mandates from the first votes, as we call it, than it is entitled to based on the result of the second vote. The party may keep these additional mandates. The other parties receive compensatory mandates in return. The CDU and above all the CSU have prevented effective electoral law reform in the past two legislative periods because they benefited the most from the current regulations. But you can't take away directly elected mandates. Federal Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht has resigned, finally. On Monday, she officially confirmed her decision after several media had already heard about the corresponding plans on Friday. She asked Chancellor Olaf Scholz to be dismissed. It was said in a statement by the minister, which was available to the German press agency from the Ministry of Defense. The media focus on my person for months hardly allows factual reporting and discussion about the soldiers, the Bundeswehr, and the security policy decision in the interests of the citizens of Germany. That's what Lambrecht wrote accordingly. The valuable work of the servicewomen and men and the many motivated people in the business area must be in the foreground. That's why I decided to make my office available. She thanks everyone who is committed to our safety every day and wishes them all the best for the future. Written statement, she didn't even come anywhere. As T-Online learned last week, the mood in the Ministry of Defense had recently hit rock bottom. Lambrecht isolated herself more and more, even from her closest employees. Chancellor Olaf Scholz accepted Lambrecht's request for her dismissal, said Deputy Government Spokeswoman Christiane Hoffmann. Scholz wanted to decide on the successor promptly, and that's in the next part of this video. The Chancellor respects Mrs. Lambrecht's decision and thanks her for the good work she has done as Minister of Defense during this difficult and challenging time, said Hoffmann. Good work? Lambrecht leaves the future department head with a whole series of construction sites. The modernization of the Bundeswehr is at the very beginning with the help of the €100 billion special fund. So far, only contracts for a good €10 billion have been concluded. Chancellor Scholz announced the rearmament after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February last year, so it's almost a year now. It's also unclear how arms deliveries to Ukraine will continue. After the federal government recently decided to supply Marder armored personnel carriers, the current debates revolve around providing Leopard main battle tanks to the attacked country. Deficiencies in numerous weapon systems, such as the Puma infantry fighting vehicles, and difficulties in procuring ammunition are also permanent problems for the troops. Lower Saxony's Interior Minister Boris Pistorius is the new defense minister. Chancellor Olaf Scholz appointed the 62-year-old as the new Minister of Defense in the federal cabinet, as government spokesman Steffen Hebestreit announced on Tuesday. Pistorius received his certificate of appointment from Federal President Frank-Walter Steinmeier on Thursday and will take his oath of office in the Bundestag, today with Thursday. Scholz described Pistorius as our country's outstanding politician. Pistorius is an extremely experienced politician who has experience in administration, has been dealing with security policies for years, and with his competence, his assertiveness, and his big heart, is exactly the right person to lead the Bundeswehr through this turning point, said the Chancellor on Tuesday in Berlin. In the past few days, several other names have been named as possible successors, including Wolfgang Schmidt, SPD leader Lars Klingbeil, and military commissioner Eva Högel. And Pistorius is a surprise. Pistorius was repeatedly said to have ambitions for political office at the federal level. For example, there were rumors that he could become federal interior minister if Nancy Faeser ran as the top candidate for the Social Democrats in the state elections in Hesse. Pistorius completed an apprenticeship as a wholesale and foreign trade merchant. From 1980 to 81, he completed his military service, after which he studied law in Osnabrück and Münster, so my hometown. Pistorius has been Minister of the Interior in Lower Saxony since 2013, and his third term began a few months ago. Before that, he was mayor of Osnabrück from 2006 to 2013. The new Secretary of Defense is widowed and has 2 daughters. With a man succeeding Lambrecht, the parity in the federal cabinet that Scholz was actually aiming for is thrown off balance. So far, 8 men and 8 women have held ministerial posts. Without further changes, the ratio would now shift to 9 men and 7 women, the Chancellor not included. The Federal Constitutional Court has dismissed a constitutional complaint for a general speed limit on motorways as inadmissible. The 2 plaintiffs, a man and a woman, believe that the legislator is violating the climate protection requirement and civil liberties by not introducing a speed limit. The highest German court in Karlsruhe announced on Tuesday that they did not justify this sufficiently. A speed limit, which as a result of the Ukraine war also came into focus as an opportunity to save energy, has been the subject of repeated arguments for years. And really for years. In the so-called traffic light coalition, the Liberals oppose this. An introduction is therefore not agreed in the coalition agreement. In many other European countries, the maximum speed you can drive on motorways or Autobahn is 130 or 120 kilometers per hour. In the spring of 21, the constitutional judges laid down in a sensational decision that climate protection is also a question of intergenerational justice. If politicians act too hesitantly today, this will be at the expense of the freedom of young people, who will then have to restrict themselves even more later. The responsible chamber of the First Senate has now announced that the climate protection requirement in the Basic Law will continue to gain relative weight as climate change progresses. This also has an impact on the legislators weighing decisions. However, the complainants had not provided any further evidence that there would be considerable restrictions on freedom in the transport sector at the end of the decade, because the emissions permitted in this area were currently being used up too quickly. It's also not clear why further savings would have to be achieved through a speed limit. The police are investigating because of racist and insulting statements on the internet against Thuringia's designated Justice and Migration Minister Doreen Denstedt from the Greens. An investigation had been initiated. The police will continue to do so in the case of criminally relevant statements, they wrote on Twitter. According to the Greens, Denstedt will be the first black female minister in East Germany after she is sworn in, which is scheduled to take place in early February in the state parliament in Erfurt. The previous police officer was named by the Greens a few days ago as the successor to the dismissed Justice and Migration Minister Dirk Adams, also from the Greens. Since then, according to the police, there have been a large number of racist and insulting comments on social networks. The qualification of Denstedt, who is an administrator, was also questioned in the comments. The anti-terrorist operation in Castrop-Rauxel in December triggered a debate about the powers of the German intelligence services. Without the alarming news from the United States Domestic Intelligence Service, the FBI, the German terrorist investigators might not have been able to react quickly enough to the planned attack by Islamists using biological weapons in Germany. Terrorist investigations in Germany are often initiated on the basis of tips from a foreign intelligence service. But how capable of acting are the German security authorities without the tips from abroad? We depend on cooperation with foreign services. The bitter reality is we need them, they don't need us. That was said by former President of the Federal Intelligence Service, the BND, Gerhard Schindler, to the German newspaper Welt am Sonntag. Again and again, it is legal measures that prevent the German intelligence services from gaining certain insights. A sample recognition, for example, whether someone downloaded the instructions for an explosive device from the internet and ordered the necessary components online, is regularly not possible for our security authorities due to the lack of data retention, explained Schindler. The parliamentary group leader of the Greens, Konstantin von Notz, told the newspaper that the powers of German services, in view of the sharp increase in security policy challenges, not only had to be reviewed, but areas such as counterintelligence should also be expanded. And according to the newspaper Welt, the federal government itself does not see any dependence on foreign services. Police and intelligence services around the world would have been working closely together for years, especially in the fight against Islamist terrorism. That's what the Federal Ministry of the Interior told the newspaper. And this concludes this week, a weekly report on German politics. Tomorrow we will talk about British politics here on this channel. I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.